Hey guys, Dislitter Magic here, and the allergens in Wisconsin at the moment are at about an 11 out of 10. I actually had to leave work because my allergies are so bad I couldn't do anything. And from what I've heard from all my friends, they're all in the same boat, so yeah. But nothing can stop me from making Kaladesh pre-release videos. It's time for the commons. Assuming they build the booster packs away, I think you're gonna get 60 of them, so pretty good portion of your pool compared to the rares and the uncommons. So here's a few of the cards that I think are the best of the best, and it's not like, oh my gosh, what an absolute bomb. It's more like, okay, this is a really good card, definitely leaning towards that color if I have 5 of these cards that are really good in that color. There are quite a few throwaway cards, and the main reason that they're throwaway is because they require other cards to work. They work together, they have synergy. So it's kind of like, werewolves, vampires, spirits, all that. You had to have more of them to work. So since you have no control over the cards that you're building your deck with, it tends to not work. So look out for cards that are really, really good on their own. But the other thing is, this is limited, okay? It's way different than constructed. It's even way different than draft, because the decks are going to be so unbelievably weak. There's going to be so many filler cards. I mean, 10, 20% if you got a really good pool and built your deck correctly, but still. There are going to be some very non-ideal cards in your deck and in everybody else's. So basically in most games, and this is a bit of a generalization, but it's usually true, in most games it's going to come down to who can hit each other with creatures the most effectively, because, creatures are pretty much what's in this set. You aren't going to build a mill deck, you aren't going to build a trick gimmick deck, and you're probably not going to build an alternate win condition deck. So the name of the game is get powerful creatures out while keeping their powerful creatures from either doing anything or even being on the battlefield. So there are tiers of importance, and I would say the bottom is tap a creature down for 1 turn. That would be the lowest tier. I mean, you're getting it out of the way, you might be able to hit them, but it's 1 turn. The next would be a repetitive tap ability that you have to pay for. Above that would be a repetitive tap ability that you don't have to pay for, or a triggered ability. Above that would be a semi-permanent pin down, like some sort of, enchantment that says that they can't attack or block. The creature is effectively gone, but not necessarily, because they could, flicker it, return it to hand, or remove the enchantment. And then obviously the top tier is actual creature destruction. Just remove the creature, kill it. Or exile it. That would even be higher, because then it's not in the graveyard. So control, removal, removal. Now, right in the middle there, as probably I'd say the next to top tier would be ambush, because ambush is almost as good as removal, because it usually is removal. There is so much ambush in the common slot that if you build ambush, you will probably win, assuming your opponent didn't do the same. If you swing with the 2/2 and they block with their 4/4, and then suddenly you +3 it, oops. Especially if you also make it indestructible or something. Do it to a menace creature, you just got rid of 2 of their creatures. So you're definitely going to see that pattern, but in general, just keep that in mind if you're not very good at remembering specific cards. That said, let's start with one example of a card that is absolutely amazing, but completely useless and limited because of synergy. Unless you can make it happen. If your deck pool or your card pool makes it look like you can make this happen, go for it. The perfect example is Gearseeker Serpent. It costs 7, but it costs 1 colorless less to cast for each artifact you control. So you could get it down to 2 blue. It's a 5/6, so if you paid 2 for that, oh my god. But you'd have to control an awful lot of artifacts. So you have to make that happen, then have the card in your hand. If you have a board with 5 artifacts on it, you're probably going to win anyway. And then you could pay 6 and he can't be blocked. That's even better. So on his own, this is useless. I mean, a 5/6 for 7, not even flying. His ability costs a fortune. Not that great. But if 50% of your deck is artifacts, oh yeah, throw him in. So for the first card that I say is actually good, let's look at one more concept. It's Aether Theory. When he enters battlefield, you get 3 energy counters. Now remember, you can spend those on anything else. It doesn't have to just be his ability, so that's important. He's a 1/3 for 2, that's good enough, but if you tap him, then pay 1 energy, you can scry 1. Now, scrying is super important and limited, because your deck sucks, so you're going to be pulling a lot of crap you don't need. So if you can get crap you don't need out of your way and put it on the bottom of your library, there you go. So if you really need a creature removal because they have like a 7/7 out or something, for every time you scry, it's like taking 2 turns instead of 1, or 2 draw steps. That's assuming that you flip up a card you don't need and put it on the bottom. If you flip up a card you do need and leave it there, it didn't really do anything. but it's repetitive scry. It's not a spell that says, scry 2, and then the spell goes to the graveyard and that's it and you wasted mana on it. This is completely free except for the energy counters. So he's basically just a crappy version of Sigiled Starfish. Sigiled Starfish was considered in the top 10 for the best limited bombs in, Theros, and then also Origins. I feel like it might have been Journey to Nyx, but whatever. It could be in anything and it would be one of the best limited cards because it's like taking multiple turns. Now here's the trick. You have to do that during your opponent's end step so that you've still got a blocker. If they waste a removal spell on him, they're an idiot. But hey, you're burning through your deck, so they might. Next up, we've got Aviary Mechanic. It's a 2/2 for 2 and. Now, pretty much any creature that's a 2/2 for 2 and is a pretty good creature. So what's the and? Well, when it enters the battlefield, you may return another permanent you control to its owner's hand. Not even a creature, a permanent. So if you happen to have something with, an enchantment on it, an aura, and it's pinning it down so it can't do anything, ta-da, it's still a permanent. I mean, it's not in exile. Bounce back to hand, recast it. If it has enter the battlefield effect, you're good to go. So in those two circumstances, it's good. If those two circumstances never come up, you've still got a 2/2 for 2. Now we've got a 1-cost instant built to last. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If it's an artifact creature, it gains indestructible until end of turn. Doesn't even need that second part, which is like outrageous. If you just +2/+2 something, you probably just killed their creature. I mean, this is classic ambush. It only costs 1. If you pull it, it has to go in your deck if you're going white. Here's its cousin, built to smash. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn for 1 red. That beats every single spell in my Mr. Nibbles deck. All of them. +3 attack, +3 toughness. I mean, that's insane. That can get out of, red kill damage. Oh, and if it's an artifact, it gains trample, but who cares? It's +3/+3. Although trample would be nice with +3. This is in my top 5 for the best limited cards in the entire set. Next up, we've got Commencement of Festivities. Prevent all combat damage that we dealt to players this turn, almost definitely referring solely to you in that case. This is important because it can by itself win the game. So they're swinging and saying, well, he has to block this, this, and this, so I'm going to force him to lose 2 or 3 of his creatures on this swing. Nope, take it all, and then don't take it all, prevent all the damage, just don't block anything, and then counter swing for the win. It's a little out there, and it might not be for the win, but you could counter swing for a boatload of damage. Next up is Dund Operative, which of course is a 2/2 for 2 and the and is if you control an artifact, it gets +1/+0 and has Death Touch. It's kind of a minor thing, but Death Touch is always nice. I mean, you could fend off a 10/10 with it. Next up is Giant Spectacle. It only costs 2. You can enchant a creature, and it gets +2/+1 and has Menace. Take a smaller mid-sized creature and make it a big, big problem. This card does put all your eggs in one basket, but it's a pretty powerful basket, and that basket has Menace. If they want to stop it, they have to take your crappy mid-sized not very good creature, which now is much, much bigger, and burn a creature removal on it. Either that or double block and lose 1 or both of their creatures in most cases. Hey, what if you gave it +3 and +3 for 1 as an instant? You basically just won the game. 2 of their creatures are dead, yours isn't, he's still gigantic, have fun with your win. Next up, it's the classic red abilities. Steal their creature and then hit them with it. So you gain control of target artifact or creature until end of turn, untap it, and it gains haste. So technically it could be an artifact that has an on-tap ability and then you could just use it. But normally you would take away one of their blocking creatures or potential blockers and then swing with it during combat. Who cares if it dies and they have 1 less blocker. That has always been a good mechanic in red, and it only costs 3. Next up is Impeccable Timing. Holy crap, is that a Johnny? Freaking awesome. Also, it does 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creatures, so not quite as good as Celestial Flare, but still good. It's kind of like Ambush, but I'd more call it situational creature destruction. It's still creature destruction, though. If you absolutely have to, block a 5/5 with a 2/2 and then hit him for another 3 with this card to finish him off. Unlike Celestial Flare, this card is your choice of targets, not their choice, so you don't have to do the Celestial Flare end of combat trick. Next up, we've got Inspired Charge. Yes, it's double white. Yes, it costs 4, but it's an instant, and all creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. That's kill, that's survivability. I mean, there's ambush, and then there's ambush for your entire line of creatures, and you could turn this into lethal damage if they let them through. Next up is Gearseeker Sculptor. I do kind of like this one. It almost didn't make the list because it's kind of situational, but when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It's only a 1/2 for 2, but it could be a 2/3 for 2 because it could target itself. So, I mean, a 2/3 for 2 is just a good creature. But you have the flexibility of making one of your other creatures just a little bit bigger, and it doesn't matter if they blow up the Gearseeker Sculptor after that. So if you have a 4/4 and they have a 4/4, you drop the counter on your 4/4, it's bigger, swing with it. Simple, simple. If you have a flyer, unblockable, or creature with lifelink or some sort of combination, definitely put the counter on that one, and now the game just got really serious. Now green wasn't left out of the ambush either. Ornamental Courage, it only costs 1, it's an instant, love it already. Untap target creature, it gets +1/+3 until end of turn. It's more like ambush capable blocking, but if you had a creature that's pretty big, you don't even need the boost, to block and kill something. They thought it was tapped, they thought it wasn't even a blocker. I mean, it's block ambush, it's still pretty good. If it's a 1/1, at least it probably survives. It might not even kill the opposing creature, but it would at least stop it. And if you did it to like a 3/1, hello, now it's a 4/4. It's useful in almost all combat situations, so I'm still considering it really, really good ambush, especially since it only costs 1. Now, Renegade Tactics I have to comment on first. It costs 1, it's a sorcery, and then it draws a card. And people are thinking, cool, cantrips are awesome. In Limited, not all cantrips are good. If it does something that you don't need, let's say you swapped out Renegade Tactics with a different card, and it's like a better card. Instead of pulling Renegade Tactics, you would have pulled that card, because it's literally in the card's place. So if you're hoping to just cast it, dump it off, draw another card, and hope that you pull something good, you might as well have just not put it in your deck in the first place. So a dirt cheap draw a card spell might not be as good as you think. So you have to ask yourself, does it do something that I actually give a crap about? Well, it stops one creature from blocking, so they swung with 3 and left 1 on defense so that they don't lose the game. Oops, now it can't block, you're dead, and also you get to draw a card. If the card you draw is a boost, oh boy. Next up is Revoke Privileges. Oh, I love it. It's not as good as Exiling, but as far as I'm concerned, for 3, it's gone. Whoever you drop this on cannot attack, block, or crew vehicles. They might as well not even be on the battlefield. The only way to get them back is to destroy the enchantment. So, for all intents and purposes, you've killed or exiled the creature. Anything that resembles creature removal, definitely put it in. Next up is another instant, so it's ambush time. Rush of Vitality only costs 2, and target creature gets +1/+0 and gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. People might say that this is like a really crappy Butcher's Glee, but it's actually like a really good Butcher's Glee, because Butcher's Glee says +3/+0 and lifelink, then regenerate it, but if you regenerate it, it regenerates tapped. With this one, it's indestructible, so it doesn't really matter what they do to it, it's just not going to die that turn, unless you are forced to sacrifice it or whatever. The +1 is nice, because you know it's going to turn into additional life total for you. And if you put it on a creature that does not normally have lifelink, there you go, like a giant 5/5. Well, now it's a 6/5 and it's indestructible. No matter what happens, you're going to gain 6 life that turn. Well, mostly because I haven't seen protection from colors. That would be what would prevent it. Or like a block and exile flicker, There's a small chance that you'd be able to actually trick somebody into losing a creature, too. Like if they wanted to trade, well, now you're not trading. Next up is Servant to the Conduit. It's a 2/2 for 2, and this time the and is when it enters battlefield, you get 2 energy. That's cool by itself, and then you may tap it, pay 1 energy, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's color fixing, it's slight ramping. Both are pretty important and limited, so I would definitely call this a good 2/2 and. Next up, we've got one of my favorite classifications of creatures, the Decoy Lightning Rod. He's actually almost so powerful that I wouldn't even call them like the decoy, where people really, really want to remove him, and then they burn a removal spell, and then you bring out something bigger and better that would have been a better target for the removal spell. So it's cost 3 and it's a 3/2, but every single time it becomes tapped for any reason, typically upon attack, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So imagine it's basically a 4/2 for 3. Now, the first time he attacks, it doesn't matter what they do. They took that 1 damage. I mean, before they even declare blockers, they took that 1 damage. Fun tip, if you grant him lifelink, it's still him doing the damage, so you gain 1 point on that as well. Once he's out, I mean, 4 damage every time he swings, they're going to want to get rid of him. Now, the only problem is he only has 2 toughness. You might get to swing once, do absolutely no damage other than 1, and then he's dead. So he's not that great, but I mean, for 3, that's a lot of potential damage. Next up, black is bringing it with the ambush, and this ambush is special because it persists. Choose one or both, and you don't have to pay. It's not escalate, it's not strive, it's not any of that. You get either both of them or just one of them at your discretion. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, hopefully killing it, and then put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. Make yours one bigger, make theirs one smaller, and the 1/1 counter sticks around. Talk about perfect ambush. That card is amazing. Next up, we've got Wily Bandar, which is interesting because it can just block forever. If you've got mana, it can block. It can stop anything. Unlike a 1/1 Death Toucher for 1, though, it can stop anything multiple times. Lawless Broker is pretty darn good because he's a 3/2 for 3, but when he dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So assuming that you have something else on the board, it's kind of like equipment. Like equipment that you don't have to pay to equip. Like really crappy small equipment that only gives you +1/+1, but still. Next up, you knew it was coming, Super Camel. It's a 0/4 for 1. I mean, what more do you want? You put him out there, he stops everything. If you put them out on turn 1, they are not going to hit you until they have 2 creatures. The end. Oh my god, I love Super Camel. Now, I love Runa's Gremlin, 1, for flavor reasons, and 2, because it's a 1/1 for 1, and, yeah, the rule applies to them too. For 3, you can sacrifice them at any time regardless of tap state or summoning sickness state, and then destroy target artifacts. So if they have a giant artifact creature, they may hesitate to bring it out onto the field because you're just going to blow it up. Next up is Attune with the Aether. Now this looks like a trap card, sort of, because it's kind of like a cantrip, but there's a slight bonus. So you pay 1, you search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, then put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. So you don't even get to put it on the field, but if it's color fixing, there you go, and if you're short on lands, there you go. So instead of drawing and playing this card, in its place, let's say you put in a basic land. So instead of drawing Attune with the Aether, you draw the actual basic land, and then you don't have to pay for it to cast a spell. The difference is, you get 2 energy counters. Depending upon how energy activated ability-ish your deck is, that could kind of act like 2 temporary lands. In fact, I'd kind of equate it to like, I guess a Scion, but, you know, obviously not a creature. Do keep in mind that outside of color fixing, this card is absolutely worthless if your deck doesn't use energy counters. And next up we've got Larger Than Life. Now this is a sorcery, so it's not technically ambush, but while I have a feeling your opponent would still consider it to be a problem. +4/+4 and trample to 1 target creature until end of turn. That's worth 2 mana, and that's worth them seeing it coming. I don't care. If they can't do anything about it, I'll tell them about it the turn before. I don't care how long they can see it coming for. Next up, we've got Sword of Removal. It acts more like a red spell, actually, but it is -1/-1, not damage, so it is kind of classic black. It is a sorcery, but it does only cost 2, and the funny thing is, there's a trick with this, and you probably already know it if you watched my last video. Choose a target creature, then you get 2 energy counters. Then, you may pay any amount, including 0. You could just keep the energy counters, but let's say you dump 5 energy counters into it then. The creature that you chose gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each energy counter paid this way. So you do lose the energy counters, but you could take down something just enormous. Bare minimum, it's a -2/-2 though, if you want it to be, so it's kind of like dead weight. It's like a more expensive, flexible, scalable dead weight, but that's fine. That's it for the monocolored, and fun fact, in almost every set that I can remember, any mixed color card is automatically uncommon or higher in rarity. I feel like maybe Tarkir broke that rule, I'm not sure, but that tends to be the way that they design the sets. Good news though, there are some common colorless cards. The bad news is, they're awful. Crew just isn't going to work very well in Limited because you might have to overtap, you might not be able to get like up to exactly Crew 3, you might have to overtap or it would have been like Crew 5 because that's just what you have on the field for creatures, and you have very little control over like consistently dropping in 1/1s so that you can scale it. That said, I mean, an 8/6 for 5 is pretty good, but you better have 4 power that you're like able to tap. And then if you're able to tap 4 power, that's the equivalent to not swinging with 4 power. And yes, this has menace, which is hilarious, so it's going to start killing stuff. It's probably worth it, but you're basically losing 4 attack, though. Would those creatures have been able to attack on their own, though? Nobody knows, especially in limited. So I will say that the Arendara Express might be worth putting in if you have the room for it. Keep in mind, though, that if you have just enough creatures to crew it, then they could remove 1, and you've got a beautiful lawn ornament that does nothing. If you have more than enough creatures to crew it, you probably could just swing with them and start winning the game. I would say that the Renegade Freighter is a little bit safer just because it's crew 2. I mean, crew 2 should be doable, and it's a 4-3, and whenever it attacks, it becomes a 5-4 and gains trample. That's just hilarious. And yes, obviously everybody's going to call it the trample train. In fact, if you don't call it the trample train, like, you're obviously communist or something. But Desolator, it doesn't look like it's necessarily a train. Shut up, it's a train. I don't care if it's a giant robot panda, it's got trample and I'm going to hit you with it. Now, overall, the puzzle knots are kind of crappy. They're just not great in general, even in limited, except for the red one. And yes, I know it's not literally red, but good luck, doing anything with it without red. So you drop it in for 2, and now you own an artifact, so that might be important. And then it deals 1 damage to target creature or player, preferably the player. Then if you have 3 mana later, with one of them being red, you may sacrifice it and it deals 1 damage to a target creature or player again. So it's 2 damage to the player that really can't be prevented. That's kind of important, and yeah, it's a 2-3 mana split for like 5 total. I mean, it's not that great, but, if you find yourself needing an artifact for a whole bunch of cards, it's not that bad. Plus, it can just sit there and threaten to blow up a creature that, blocked a 3 power with 4 toughness, and you might be able to do the additional 1. If they remember that, they might block differently or let it through, and if they don't remember that, you just blew up their creature. And then for some reason, the Woodweaver's puzzle knot is so much better than the other ones, it's comical. Drop it in to get 3 life. I mean, if it was just a spell that says pay 2 and gain 3 life, it wouldn't be that bad. I mean, it'd be kind of bad, but it wouldn't be that bad. But you also get 3 energy counters. If you sacrifice it for 3, you gain 3 more life and get 3 more energy counters. That's 6 energy counters. In case you weren't counting, that's also 6 life. That is powerful. It will keep you alive and keep reloading your abilities. Now, Bastion Mastodon I like because it's basically one of the robots from Power Rangers, and also it's a 4-5 for 5 and you don't have to worry about color fixing, which at 5, I mean, really? Really, you drew 5 mountains and you haven't drawn a single island in your 2-color deck? So not a big deal, but I mean, it's a 4-5 for 5. I mean, that's just a solid creature. I would probably drop it in if I'm a little bit short on creatures, regardless of my colors. Now, if you're playing white, you can grant him vigilance. Considering his size and his toughness, that is huge. Ha ha! Giant-sized elephant puns. And in keeping with the pattern, with the colored but not really artifacts, we've got the Prakata Pillar Bug, which wishes it was a black creature. If you do pay 1 black, and you don't have to tap him or anything, you can do it multiple times, don't know why you would, he gains lifelink until end of turn, and he's a 2-3. He's hard to kill, you're probably going to get that too. Either they're going to let him through, or they're going to have to chump him. Either way, you're getting 2 life. I'd absolutely love that. I don't think he's quite worth it if you're not playing black, though. He's not quite good enough. The other really good one is, of course, the Najran Am Cobra, which only costs 2. It's a 2-1. I mean, that's kind of crappy by itself, but for 1 green, you can grant him Death Touch until end of turn. So, are they ever really going to want to block him while you have a mana open? That is scary. Robot Cobras in general are pretty scary, actually. And next up, we've got Mechanical Super Camel, also known as Consulate Skygate. He's a 0-4 defender with reach, so almost flying, but does it really matter that he's not flying? He's a 0-4 defender. He's not going anywhere. He doesn't cost 1 mana, but, I mean, 2 reach, why not? It's kind of like paying 1 mana to strap a jetpack to a camel. Next up, we've got the grandmother of them all, the Inventor's Goggles. It only costs 1. Now, the equip cost is 2, but if you drop in an Artificer onto the battlefield, you can equip it for free. 2 as an equip cost is more than worth it, though, because the equipped creature gets +1/+2. If they blow it up, move it over to the next creature. Equipment is huge because it's a boost that you pay for sort of once, and then it just doesn't go away. You can move it to creature to creature to creature. It's just a boost that keeps going and going and going. You're not going to surprise anybody. You're not going to ambush anybody. But, I mean, come on. +1/+2. Make a creature that's mid-size into gigantic. I'll take it. The same to a lesser extent goes to the Torch Gauntlet because it does cost 2, its equip cost is 2, which is still reasonable, still doable, and the equipped creature gets +2/+0. So in Limited you tend to have more mana than you know what to do with. By the time you're top decking, you pull a land, you've got 5, 6, 7 lands doing absolutely nothing, you have no cards in hand. Okay, now I've got equipment, let's pay 2 to move it. If you take a 2/2 and make it a 4/2 on like turn 3, you're going to cause some problems for your opponent. So they finally blow up the creature. Alright, move it to the next creature. Now that's it for the commons, but there's one thing I wanted to mention at the end, and this will kind of piss you off, but, whatever. Mathematically, for approximately every 24 people at your pre-release, one of them will pull one of the, what do they call it, the masterpieces, which is like the new expeditions. Now, because they're not legal in Standard, some people say, oh, that's nice, it's worth money, that's cool, I just paid for my pre-release, woohoo, but you're actually allowed to play it. That's the official rules. If it comes out of a booster pack, you're allowed to play it in draft or in sealed. So, if you pick up Soul Ring, which, let's see, what would that be? For every 720 people at your pre-release, assuming I'm doing the math correct there, somebody will pull a Soul Ring. You drop it in for 1 and it generates 2 mana, over and over and over. You just won. You just won the pre-release. Have fun. Congratulations. On turn 3, you can generate 4 mana. I mean, I would just count on this to show up, hopefully, most of the games, and go super expensive on my creatures. Now, it is double colorless, though, so, it's not that useful, but artifact heavy, giant artifacts, whatever you want. So, your opponent could pull something completely worthless and useless and very situational, or they could pull, one of the 3 swords. Wait, why am I saying your opponent? It could be you. Lucky you. So far I've covered the uncommons and the commons. I could cover the mythics and the rares, but you only get 7 of them, so, why? I mean, it's why would I say what to watch out for when you're not looking at a pool of 60, you're not looking at a pool of, what would it be, 18? You're looking at a pool of 7, just read the damn card and decide if it's good. Based on, good or not good, from what I've said from these 2 videos, I think you guys should be able to grasp it. So I don't think I'll end up making that particular video. That said, there are some more good tip videos coming up, so hit that subscribe button so you don't miss them, and I'll see you guys next video. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go take enough diphenylhydramine to take down a bull elephant.